Phoenix Rising, Willow Saga, Part 1, Birth of a Racer, Chapter 2, or, Okay, Now What? Zan-Karan was accustomed to having to give orders, but he had never had to take charge during a crisis. That was Zundiata's duty according to his father. However, none of the six-fingered Zathrians on the ship knew about the politics of the houses. To them, if you had 5 fingers, you were to be obeyed without question, no matter what. Thankfully, Zan was able to use this to his advantage. Head to the escape pods, Zan commanded to a group cowering in a nearby corridor. Make any you meet along the way go with you, and if they resist, tell them the order comes directly from Zan-Karan himself. Cowering won't make the Black Raiders keep you alive, the Zathrian finished in his head. The emergency alarms were blaring all over the ship with the hapless crew running around with no rhyme or reason. The main reason Zan-Karan had chosen this ship as his temporary transport was because there weren't any high-ranking Zathrians. On transport ships like this one, the ship's computer handled most of the functions, so there wasn't any real need for a crew with the ability to think. This was mostly done to ensure high-ranking passengers didn't have to take any orders from someone in a different house. One major flaw in this system was that the computer went down if the ship was damaged in any way. This was to allow a member of one of the noble houses to take over without much trouble. Zan was the only high-ranking Zathrian on board, so he didn't have to worry about squabbling over who was in charge. However, all Zan could think about was that if he wasn't on board, every single one of the Zathrians on this ship would have likely died due to their incompetence in a crisis. Cuton was able to keep his composure, though, while herding anyone he could find toward the escape ships. It disturbed him how many he found cowering like the ones before him. Worse yet, they were high-ranking officers. Go! The 5-fingered Zathrian boomed at the top of his voice. At that, the group was brought out of their stupor. The 9 of them bowed to Zan-Karan in a manner that is similar to how people in ancient China would bow to the emperor. The sight turned the Zathrian's stomach. Thankfully, before he had to tell them to, they got up and ran to the escape deck. While making his own way to safety, the young Zathrian turned his thoughts to their attackers. There was something about this whole business that was weighing heavily on his mind. Black Raiders had never attacked a transport vessel before. Why were they attacking now? All of the information Cuton had learned about them was that the Black Raiders were just petty thieves who tended not to leave any survivors. True, but they mostly just went after private cargo vessels. Even though few ever actually witnessed the race, everyone knew the story. The carrier and attack ships appeared out of the asteroid belts in most of the areas of the galaxy. So quick it was as if they appeared by magic. With military precision, the attack ships would damage the engines, making their target immobile. Once this was done, the carrier's large, sharp, drill-like structure would pierce the hull of their target, killing all those who were within. At last, some of the pirates, assumedly in specialized suits, would raid the vessels for whatever plunder they were looking for. Some of the items were valuable, while other things they took were just junk. Once done, they vanished as quickly as they came, leaving behind only a derelict vessel filled with holes drifting in space. There was method to what they stole. Of that, Zan-Karan knew for certain. The raids were too methodical and well executed for there not to be. Whatever their endgame was, Zan-Karan didn't care. What mattered to him at that precise moment was why they had changed their pattern. True, they were near an asteroid belt, but it was the planetoid belt, where the asteroids were the size of tiny planets or medium-sized moons. No ship could fly in that area of space without being destroyed. For that reason, Zathrian transport ships tended to skirt around that asteroid belt. This attack should not have happened. The Black Raiders should not be in this area of space. For them to be here, it meant that the Black Raiders were looking for something very specific that was on their ship. The young Zathrian knew it was his duty to get every Zathrian off this transport ship. After all, whatever the raiders were after, they could have it. Lives mattered more than things. To his back, Zan felt rather than heard someone approach. He didn't need to turn around to know who it was. None of the passengers and crew on this ship would have moved toward him, except for the ones he brought. And even then, there was only one who had dared get so close. "All to help get the crew to the escape pods and stay there," Cuton said, not turning around together with a small smile hidden on his face. A part of him wished the rest of his people would treat him like this. "My lord, I'll not leave your side until I have seen you safe in an escape pod," a male voice stated without having been told to speak. "Mufasa." Zan turned to face his friend. "You are too loyal for your own good." Upon seeing him, the five-fingered Zathrian was always shocked at how Mufasa perfectly captured the physical perfection all the males of his people desired. Mufasa was 7.5 feet tall and built like a grizzly bear. Even his muscles seemed to have muscles. However, they didn't seem to look deformative as they would have on a human. Instead, Lu was elegant even amidst the build of his body. His hair was tied up in a simple top knot, which only heightened his fearsome-looking features. The only thing preventing him from achieving the greatness that his people envisioned was that he had 6 fingers on his hands. He wore the exact same style of clothes that Zara did, but on him the effect would cause most to flee in fright. However, Zan-Karan knew that Mufasa was the most kind and loyal guardian anyone could wish for. Mufasa slightly lowered his head instead of bowing. "Orders are orders, but if anything happened to you, your father would kill me." The huge Zathrian thought for a moment. "Wait, he would kill me 9 times just to make sure he got the job done properly." "The sad thing is, my father would actually do that," Zan thought with a small sigh. His father didn't even like him. "Any idea how many are not on their way to safety?" Zan-Karan asked, hoping for a really small number. "None, according to Zara's latest report," Lu quickly responded. "All the crew and passengers, save for us, are on their way to not getting killed by pirates." The five-fingered Zathrian headed down the corridor toward safety. Cuton would have preferred to get the copy of the ship's manifest to compare with what the attackers stole. Hopefully it would explain why this was happening. However, there was no time. Wordlessly, Mufasa followed him. As they journeyed down toward the escape ships, the ship shook more violently as black raiders intensified their attack. The sirens became almost deafening. Zan-Karan would have preferred to be in front, but Mufasa refused to permit that. Instead, Mufasa used his huge body to both block Zan from the attackers in the front if any of them happened to board the ship early, and to keep most eyes off him. Cuton debated whether or not to object. The pirates hadn't breached the hull yet, mostly because they were all still breathing, and he wasn't in any danger until they did. Before Zan-Karan was able to decide to give voice to his opinion, the ship lurched violently to one side with enough force to cause both Zathrians to fall. Mufasa was somehow able to fall in such a way to cushion Zan so the younger Zathrian didn't have to hit the ground. Smoke from broken conduits in the ceiling filled the room with a foul-smelling gas. The smell from the gas wasn't anything toxic, so Cuton wasn't bothered by that. However, the sight of the black tip of the raider cruiser popping through the ship's hull in front of him filled him with dread. "By the ancestors," Zan-Karan said out loud without meaning to, "what on earth are we gonna do now?" That exact same question was being asked by Willow Martinez on her ship as she tried to figure out which of the wires she was supposed to fix. She had been at this task for what seemed like hours, and the ship just kept saying, "Life support systems malfunctioning, life support systems malfunctioning," without giving her any idea what the hell she was supposed to do. She was a studio arts major, for crying out loud. Willow was not the person to try and deal with advanced technologies on alien spaceships. What the hell am I supposed to do, you stupid voice? Willow finally shouted in frustration. As if in answer to her question, all at once, most of the wires in the console vanished just like the top had done earlier. Willow mentally kicked herself for not stating that earlier, if that was all it took to make this job a hell of a lot easier. The wires were some kind of color that Willow could only describe as puce-ish, but each and every single one of them was damaged in some way. The one on the far right looked like the casing on the wires was fraying and some kind of bluish liquid was starting to leak out of it. Judging from how the liquid was causing the bottom of the panel she was working on to smoke, Willow guessed it was something she didn't want to get on her skin. This liquid also seemed to be damaging the other two wires. Okay, Willow said out loud with the hopes that if she did so, the ship would help her in some way. Any ideas on what I should use to plug this leak before we end up with Swiss cheese panels? Unlike before, nothing happened. Willow guessed she was on her own this time. Worse yet, Willow could tell that something was going bad in the air and it was getting harder and harder for her to breathe. Willow needed to stop this leak and somehow patch up the other two wires. And she needed to do it quickly or she was going to die. The problem was, what did she have at her disposal that could possibly fix something that was obviously heavily corrosive and could damage her skin? This needed to be the most powerful substance she had at her disposal. Duct tape! Willow exclaimed with a small clap of her hands for emphasis. Willow usually kept at least 6 rolls of duct tape in her sidecar for emergency repairs. The sidecar of her motorcycle. Her motorcycle that she was thrown from when that explosion, whatever the hell it was, happened. The motorcycle and sidecar that were no doubt a heap somewhere in the middle of the Nevada desert. I really wish I had my motorcycle and sidecar, Willow whispered to herself with a heavy heart. As if in answer to her prayers, all of a sudden, as if by magic, her motorcycle, Comet, sidecar, and all of her belongings appeared in the room. Thank you, God, Willow said, although in retrospect she thought she probably should have thanked the voice instead, but none of that mattered now. Willow ran over to the sidecar and was able to quickly locate a blue roll of duct tape. Soon as the duct tape was in her hands, Willow sprinted back to the console she was trying to repair. Wet hair, a color too dark to really be blonde but too light to be brown, clung in front of her face, obscuring her vision. While ripping off a piece of duct tape, Willow was able to use her elbow to move her hair out of her face. Here's hoping duct tape really can fix anything, Willow stated to herself as she wrapped the tape around the leaking wire. The duct tape seemed to be stopping the leak, but Willow held her breath for several seconds, eyes glued to the wire that was once leaking, just to see if time would eventually dissolve the duct tape. A minute passed, then 2. Yet the duct tape still held. Oh my god, I could actually survive whatever the hell I've got myself into, Willow thought as a surge of relief spread through her body like a wave on a beach. Feeling of relief didn't last long, however. Willow was smart enough to know that there was no way in hell that duct tape would be a permanent fix. However, now was not the time for permanent fixes. Now was the time for quick and dirty ones. That didn't mean she wasn't going to put another 5 layers of duct tape on the leaking wire, as well as 3 layers of duct tape on the wires that looked like they could start leaking any moment. Life support systems functioning, the voice said at long last. Great, Willow replied. Does that mean I'm going to get some answers on who the hell you are, where the hell I am, and what the hell is going on? Pilot, activate. Pilot, please activate. The voice said over and over again, apparently deciding that Willow's questions didn't need any answering. Willow rubbed her temples in frustration. Okay, why don't you just tell me where the pilot is, and I'll ask the pilot what the hell's going on. Pilot just repaired life support systems on middle panel, the voice answered. Realization slowly dawned on Willow. Wait, I'm the pilot? Pilot, please activate. Pilot, please activate. The voice repeated again. Willow decided to state the obvious. I don't know how to do whatever the hell you're talking about doing, and I am not entirely sure it is covered by my HMO. The large chair in the center of the room swiveled to face her. Willow hadn't really looked too closely at this chair, mostly due to the fact she was more concerned about trying to save her ass. However, there was no denying it now. This chair also had a lot of machinery hooked up to it, including control panels where the hands would go if you sat down. Also, there was a large visor that appeared to be able to go over the eyes of whoever was sitting down. Willow had to sit in that chair to do whatever this voice wanted her to do. Now, she had no idea how she knew this information, but the thought was in her head nevertheless. Also, before Willow really had a chance to notice, her feet were starting to walk toward the chair. It took all of her willpower to force her body to go back under her control and stop moving. What happens if I don't activate? Willow questioned the voice. All ship systems will cease functioning within 2 hours, the voice replied flatly. With that, Willow walked over to the chair and sat down, not knowing that this action was going to change the history of the galaxy. Nothing happened for several seconds. Willow was starting to wonder if she was doing something wrong. Okay, what now? She asked. Then the chair turned on. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Phoenix Rising Willow Saga. If you would like to support the show, please go to patreon.com. We could always use your support to not only do this content, but other shows as well.